Hello, I'm Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. I'm glad to be here with Judy Chu, my colleague from the LA area. As Vice Chair of the Armenian Caucus, I join you today to mark the 1,000th day of the unlawful detention of the Armenian POWs and political prisoners by dictatorial Azerbaijan. In 2023, Azerbaijan's military culminated its 9-month blockade of food, fuel, and medicine. It conducted an ethnic cleansing of over 100,000 indigenous Armenians from their homes, from the area of Artsakh, where Armenians had lived for 2,000 or 3,000 years. As they fled, the Azerbaijani forces detained dozens of ethnic Armenians, including the democratically elected representatives of the people of Artsakh. For over 1,000 days, those Armenian POWs held after the war is over, and political prisoners have endured abuse and torture in Azerbaijani captivity. Detainees have been forced to show up to sham court proceedings. When they appear, it appears that they've been beaten and bloodied. And reporting from Human Rights Watch documents that Armenian POWs in Azerbaijani captivity were regularly beaten by prison officers. They've been denied fair trials, although it's hard to see what they would be tried for. They were the legitimate officials of the Republic of Artsakh, and I guess they would be put on trial for trying to prevent the ethnic cleansing of 100,000 people from their ancestral homes. So they've been denied fair trials, leading most recently to extended prison terms ranging from 15 years to life, again, being held to account in sham trials on the charge of trying to prevent ethnic cleansing. Just this February, an Azerbaijani military court sentenced 5 former Artsakh leaders, including former President my pronunciation is not going to be as good as your pronunciation. Ariak Harutunian and the former foreign minister, David Babayan, who met with me in my office just a few months before his abduction by Azerbaijani military authorities, and former military commander Levan Minaksakian. These were all sentenced to life in prison following a trial held almost entirely behind closed doors with no independent observers permitted, and 16 defendants were collectively accused of 2,500 crimes, imaginary crimes. They didn't present any evidence that the public has seen. Days later, the same court sentenced the philanthropist and former state minister Ruben Vardanian to up to 20 years, on top of more than a year he's already spent in solitary confinement. Amnesty International called the proceedings against him nothing short of a travesty, noting that civilians were tried before a military court in flagrant violation of any international guarantees. Now, Azerbaijan is ranked by Freedom House as having a 6 out of 100 freedom score. So even Azerbaijanis, native Azerbaijanis, Azeris, cannot receive a free trial in that kangaroo court system, let alone Armenians who have faced the onslaught of violence and systematic bigotry from that government for decades. That is why it is important that the world not fall for the lies of Aliyev, the dictator of Azerbaijan, when he tries to falsely claim this as a criminal matter. According to Aliyev, committing ethnic cleansing and butchery is noble, and resisting ethnic cleansing is a crime. Let's be clear. These POWs only crime is believing that the indigenous people of Artsakh have a right to dignity, autonomy, and self-determination. This is not a new pattern for Azerbaijan. Armenian servicemen captured during and after the 2020 war were held for years past the ceasefire that was supposed to secure their release. Renewed mass detentions during the 2023 ethnic cleansing simply escalated the strategy of Azerbaijan has used to terrorize ethnic Armenians for years. Given the documented executions of Armenian POWs by Azerbaijani forces, including several executions that were horrifically recorded and distributed on social media by the perpetrators and documented by Human Rights Watch, it is vital that the United States clearly advocate for the immediate and unconditional release of all Armenian POWs. That's why I have offered an amendment in the markup at the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I offered that amendment previously. I negotiated changes in it with the chair of the committee, and we now have his support for an amendment to say that America should use all of its tools to achieve the release of these POWs. This should have happened 1,000 days ago. This administration is seeking to secure a lasting peace in the South Caucasus, but there can be no lasting peace until each and every Armenian POW and political prisoner is freed from the Azerbaijani prisoners and freed to return home to their families. Now, they can't return home because it is not safe for any Armenian to be in Artsakh, but at least they can return to be with their families in Armenia. Now, my amendment reflects the growing international consensus on releasing the Armenian POWs, including the European Parliament's resolution adopted in April that condemns Azerbaijan's unjust detention of Armenian prisoners of war. Azerbaijan's response was not to release a single prisoner, but instead to sever ties with the European Parliament altogether. Today we mark the 1,000th day of Azerbaijan's unlawful captivity of the Armenian POWs and political prisoners. Tomorrow, the House Foreign Affairs Committee will finally have an opportunity to go on record and condemn this continued injustice by supporting my amendment and calling on Azerbaijan to immediately and unconditionally release these prisoners. I want to thank you for the time I've taken, and do I turn it back over to you or introduce my colleague? I can introduce the former mayor of Monterey Park, my friend for decades, Judy Chu.
Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu from the San Gabriel Valley, which includes our country's oldest Armenian American community in Pasadena. I want to thank Congressmember Brad Sherman and ANCA Executive Director Aram Hamparian for putting this event together today so that we can continue to raise our voices for those who cannot speak freely for themselves. Today is an incredibly heartbreaking milestone. 1,000 days since Armenian prisoners of war and civilian hostages were unlawfully detained by Azerbaijan. Following Azerbaijan's ethnic cleansing of the Armenian population of Artsakh in 2023, more than 100,000 Armenians were forced from their ancestral homeland. Today, at least 19 Armenian prisoners of war and civilian hostages remain in Azerbaijani custody, where they're subjected to abuse, torture, and denied their most basic human and legal rights. That's why I'm so grateful for Congressmember Brad Sherman's leadership in securing this bipartisan amendment in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, declaring it a sense of Congress that Azerbaijan should immediately and unconditionally release all Armenian prisoners of war and political prisoners. These detainees deserve justice, they deserve due process, and they deserve to come home. We cannot allow the world to look away. Now, I have been proud to stand with the Armenian American community for many, many years. Back in 2019, I was so deeply honored to vote for the Armenian Genocide Resolution when it finally passed out of the House after decades of advocacy. And I also made it my mission to go to Armenia, and then had the privilege of going to Artsakh. And in fact, I was one of the few members of Congress to be able to visit Artsakh before its people were forcibly displaced. Before my trip, Azerbaijani representatives urged me not to go and warned that there would be consequences. But I went anyway because I believed the world needed to see the Armenian people, their communities, their churches, and their deep connection to their homeland. And in fact, it also breaks my heart to think of Artsakh being destroyed and its population now in Armenia and other places as refugees. And you know what? I am so glad I saw how beautiful Artsakh was, because when I came back, I found I was banned from entering Azerbaijan. But I wear this as a badge of honor. Because if standing up for human rights means I'm no longer welcome in Azerbaijan, then that only strengthens my determination to keep fighting for justice for their Armenian people. So we must make sure that the people of Artsakh can return. We must make sure that the cultural and religious artifacts are maintained intact, and we must secure the return of the political prisoners from Azerbaijan. So today, as we mark these 1,000 days, we send a clear message. These prisoners have not been forgotten, their families have not been forgotten, and the people of Artsakh have not been forgotten. And we will not stop speaking out until every prisoner is released and the Armenian people can live in peace, security, and dignity. Thank you for all your advocacy.
And now, Laura Friedman, who also is an outstanding member of the California delegation.
Thank you. I want to thank Representative Sherman for gathering us all here today and for authoring a very important amendment that I'll be very happy to see come forward. My name is Laura Friedman, and I'm proud to represent the largest Armenian American community in the entire nation. We are here today because today, Armenian prisoners of war and civilian hostages will have spent 1,000 long days in Azerbaijan's unlawful detention, bearing, I am sure, untold terror and abuse and threats of execution. I refuse to allow the world to forget these prisoners. Just like I refuse to forget the 150,000 indigenous Armenians who were violently forced out of Artsakh, their ancestral homeland. Like my colleague Judy Chu that you just heard from, I had the privilege of visiting Artsakh several years ago and saw the incredibly vibrant and ancient Armenian community, saw churches that went back to the 4th century, saw some of the oldest Armenian artifacts in the world. And the idea that those people have been uprooted and forced from their homeland is tragic. And the thought of those monuments that are important not just for the Armenian community, but for the entire world, to think of them being desecrated and destroyed by Azerbaijan as part of a cultural ethnic cleansing is heartbreaking and something that should not be tolerated by the rest of the world. We have seen religious and cultural sites destroyed. The civilian lives are being uprooted and sent far from their homes to an uncertain future with no thought to their ability to return to the lands that they have worked for generations, to the businesses that they have built, to the lives that they have led. Earlier this year, after orchestrating years-long sham trials, Azerbaijan sentenced these same Armenian hostages to extended prison sentences. Azerbaijan has tried shutting out the eyes of the world from witnessing their atrocities, but we're here to say that we refuse to ignore that this government's crimes. We refuse to allow justice to continue to be denied to these hostages. Just as I did for years as the mayor of Glendale and as a member of the California State Assembly, I will continue to fight for our shared values. That's why I am proud to have joined my Democratic and Republican colleagues in urging Secretary of State Marco Rubio to ensure the safe return of forcibly displaced Armenians to their indigenous homeland in Artsakh. I have also advocated and will continue to advocate for U.S. sanctions against Azerbaijan for those to be maintained and not lifted, for humanitarian aid for displaced Armenians, for support for the refugees forced out of Artsakh who right now are homeless, and for educational programs right here in America to raise awareness for the plight of Armenians at home and of the Armenian genocide, the first genocide of the 20th century. I have also co-sponsored the Armenian Genocide Education Act and will continue to work arm in arm with my community and with the Armenian community across this country to make sure that those voices are not ignored. And I will say that the Armenian community, particularly in Los Angeles, has been incredibly effective and determined. And they have made this cause a cause of Los Angeles and of the United States. So we really owe them a great debt. And I want to acknowledge just their tenacity in fighting for the Armenian cause. The Armenian people have endured genocide and displacement, and yet they have thrived. They are thriving in America, they have thrived around the world, and I will always stand with them as they are attacked. Peace cannot come without accountability, lasting security for Armenia, and a respect for Armenia's sovereignty, and for the rights of indigenous people in Artsakh, and the right to self-determination for all peoples. I'm proud to stand with the Armenian people and with Representative Sherman in this fight as we call, again, for the release of all Armenian detainees and all of these hostages. I promise to keep standing up for justice and accountability and for the Armenian people, and I am so proud to call them my constituents and to have their faith. Thank you so much, Representative.
Now a man who has fought with the Armenian American community and represented them for decades, my friend Jim Costa. I'm going to have to sneak out and go to the floor on another matter. I want to thank the Armenian National Committee of America for putting this event together, and thank all of you students for standing up for justice and standing literally up behind us.
Good afternoon. I want to thank my colleagues, Congressman Brad Sherman, who he and I, along with Congresswoman Judy Chu and Congresswoman Freeman, along with the other members of the Armenian caucus, for their deep passion and desire to do the right thing, to stand up for the people of Armenia and Armenians throughout the world. I want to associate my comments with them, and I'd like to add to that. My name is Congressman Jim Costa, and as I like to say, I come from the land of William Saroyan, a noted Armenian writer and author in so many ways, imbibing the spirit of what Armenian people are all about and their history. Enough is enough. Today marks 1,000 days since the Armenian prisoners of war and civilian hostages have been unlawfully held by Azerbaijan. 1,000 days of families waiting for answers, waiting for their loved ones to come home. We are here today because it's important to never forget Azerbaijan's ongoing crimes. Why? Because it matters. The Minsk Accord basically are did. Why? Because they are unwilling to comply by the agreements that were involved. Furthermore, they took upon themselves to basically invade the homeland of Nagorno-Karabakh, otherwise we refer to as Artsakh. Artsakh is the homeland for 120,000 plus Armenians, in which their communities, their villages, their churches, their historical references have in many ways been destroyed by the Azerbaijan military. And it goes beyond that. I mean, these atrocities frankly, go back decades. They go back decades. Let's be true about this. As I said, I came from an area in the San Joaquin Valley in California where many, many years ago the Armenian community came in part from the genocide, the first genocide in the 20th century, and in which they were fortunate to be able to escape and to relocate as they did throughout the world. And those families I grew up with, I know those families, the Abrahamians and the Collegians and the Kazarians, and the list goes on. Our neighbors that we farmed with. And I learned the message, I learned the history as a young boy from our neighbors about these atrocities. And it's hard for young people to understand man's inhumanity to mankind. And that's why I'm so pleased that we have the young people that are here, because you're the future of our country, but you're also a reflection of all the Armenians who have suffered throughout this last century since the genocide. So when we talk about the detention of these prisoners, it is a clear violation of international law, a clear violation of international law and basic human rights. It follows the forced displacement, as I noted a moment ago, of over 120,000 Armenians from Artsakh, their native homeland. A human catastrophe that the world cannot and should not forgive. Congress has an opportunity to act this week. We have my friends, Representative Sherman, who has been a constant advocate, and his amendment is very important, and we should all support that. I have another amendment that we will be pushing to hold Azerbaijan accountable and secure the release of these prisoners. My amendment includes submitting that the Department of State would prohibit any U.S. security assistance to Azerbaijan until the government takes meaningful steps to ensure the unconditional release of these Armenian detainees and the withdrawal of its forces from sovereign Armenian territory. Today, we see Azerbaijan impinging upon sovereign Armenian territory. When will it stop? And we're also here, in fact, to reflect, as has been noted, the destruction and to the degree we can force the worldwide community to offer protection of the culture and religious heritage, artifacts that in many cases sadly have been destroyed. But today I'm making a direct call. Azerbaijan must immediately and unconditionally release all the Armenian prisoners of war and civilian hostages. And I urge this administration to use every diplomatic lever available to make that happen. I said that to Secretary of State Rubio when he testified before the Foreign Relations Committee. And I made that clear, and he said they were working on it. I said we need to do more than work on it. We need to use every available tool to make sure that Azerbaijan listens. These people are not bargaining chips that are reflected by our young folks here. These names, these photographs should not be held in a way to leverage. They are fathers, they are mothers, they are sons and daughters. The families have waited long enough, over 1,000 days. It's time to bring them home, and we will continue to work together, not only in this effort, but to ensure that in the future we maintain and protect the sovereignty of Armenia for the future. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all of you. Take care of yourself. On this day, as we mark 1,000 days of Azerbaijani hostage diplomacy, we reaffirm our call for peace. A real peace, a just peace. A peace worthy of the name. Today, here in Washington, the so-called peace deal announced last year is being sold as progress. In reality, it's a consolidation of Azerbaijan's ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, the legitimization of the last war, a prelude to the next war. The normalization of Azerbaijani hostage taking, its occupation of Armenian territory, the destruction of Christian holy sites, some as old as the 1st century, its obstruction of the right of Artsakh refugees to return home. A false peace that locks in Azerbaijan's genocidal aims and locks the free people out of their indigenous homeland. A false peace that would reward Azerbaijan with our American tax dollars. Mark my words, if we reward Azerbaijan with American treasure, we will reap a bitter harvest of renewed Azerbaijani aggression. Violence funded by the U.S. taxpayer at the expense of American interests and yet more Armenian land and lives. All the costs being borne by the Armenians, all the benefits flowing to Baku. Every new Armenian concession met with yet more Azerbaijani demands. The fact is, a true peace, a real peace, requires accountability, starting right here in Washington, with our Congress, with our government, securing the release of Armenian hostages, now held for 1,000 days. Securing Azerbaijan's withdrawal of its forces from occupied Armenian territory. Securing the return of Armenians in safety to Artsakh under an international mandate. Securing the protection of Christian holy sites, which are being bulldozed across Artsakh. And finally, the full enforcement of Section 907 sanctions against Azerbaijan. The statutory protection of American taxpayers against complicity in Christian persecution. Baku will say that these represent obstacles, barriers, a block to peace. The fact of the matter is that they represent the very building blocks of peace, of real peace, of a durable peace. A peace based on justice, human rights, religious freedom, a peace worthy of its name. Thank you.